I was around 11 when it happened, still straddling the blurred edge between childhood innocence and something far more sinister awakening inside me. Our town sat nestled in the hollow of a quiet valley in Washington, far from the sea, far from scrutiny. People called it peaceful. Safe. But safety is just the absence of exposure. My mother had this friend from her reckless high school years, a woman who always smiled with her mouth but never with her eyes. She had 2 children, a son the same age as my younger brother, and a daughter, Madison, just 1 year older than me. We were often thrown together, the children of mothers trying to rekindle a past that should have stayed buried. Madison was cruel. That loud, performative kind of cruel, the kind that masks fear with dominance. She would pinch, mock, laugh too loudly when I failed to respond correctly. But I tolerated her, not out of fear or fondness, but because there was something about her I found useful. She drew the attention of others like flies to honey, and I preferred shadows. Shadows were safer. Shadows hid my thoughts. One summer night, one of many, we decided to sleep outside in her backyard. No tents. Just sleeping bags sprawled under the sky like offerings. In that town, people rarely locked their doors. Fences were low. The illusion of security was gospel. But that night, something felt wrong. Unfamiliar. The kind of wrong that presses against your skin and whispers at the back of your mind. We were lying on the grass, the warm hum of summer thick around us, and Madison had finally dozed off after exhausting herself with small talk and bitter jokes. Her house, a flat, 1-story duplex, had a carport you could see straight through, into neighboring yards. The bushes along the back fence were thick but poorly maintained, separating her yard from the homes beyond. Beyond that, a road. Busy during the day. Quiet now. I kept still in my sleeping bag, my eyes darting beneath half-lowered lids. It struck me then, there was no sound. None. No cars on the road, no bugs, not even the rustle of wind through the dry grass. It was as if the world had taken a breath and forgotten how to exhale. The fear came on slow, like a sickness. I could feel it crawling up my spine, and I welcomed it. I do not fear fear itself. It sharpens the senses. Makes you real. And then the ringing began. A high-pitched whine layered with static, as though someone had ripped open a frequency not meant to be heard. It pulsed behind my eyes and bled into my teeth. Just when I began to think I might bleed from my ears, Madison sat up. Rigid. Robotic. Her eyes wide open, staring past me, her breath ragged like a cornered animal. She turned her head sharply, too sharply, to face me, but I knew she wasn't looking at me. Not really. Her gaze sliced through me like I was a window to something beyond. And then, she spoke. Not English. Not Spanish. I am fluent in both. This was something else, something ancient and serrated, like words spoken with blades instead of tongues. She grew louder. The world grew darker. It was as if the moon had extinguished itself in terror, and all the light it had lent the night was suddenly gone. I could barely see her now, just a silhouette spewing madness, her mouth stretching wider, the words faster, harsher. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it, something shifting, moving, seeping upward from the earth like ink in water. A shadow. It did not walk. It did not glide. It rose. It formed into the shape of a cloaked figure, but there were no feet beneath the fabric, no face beneath the hood. It drifted across the yard, and though it made no sound, I felt every step. I felt it inside my bones. I could not move. Not because I was scared, but because I did not want to. I wanted to see what would happen. The thing lunged, not with fury, but with purpose, and it vanished into Madison like smoke into a bottle. Her body convulsed. The language sharpened. Her mouth foamed. That was when I stood fast. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted witnesses. I stormed inside and screamed for my mother, my voice deliberately louder than necessary. Madison's mother appeared too, both women hurrying past me into the night. I stayed at the doorway, eyes fixed on Madison's crumpled form. When they reached her, she was still asleep. Serene. The world had returned to normal. The insects sang again. Distant engines hummed. The lie of peace restored. Madison awoke when they shook her and blinked at them like nothing had happened. They turned back to me with that look adults wear when faced with things they cannot understand. "Do you want to go back outside?" they asked. I smiled with no warmth. "No. I think I've seen enough." I slept on the couch that night, though I barely closed my eyes. Madison stayed out there, alone. That, too, I found interesting. Morning came heavy and stale, the way only summer mornings in small towns do, smelling faintly of asphalt, lawn clippings, and last night's sweat. I was already awake when the others began to stir. Truth be told, I had not really slept. I just laid there on the living room couch, my eyes half shut, listening. Waiting. The words Madison had spoken echoed in my mind. That strange, snarling tongue, I could still hear it, feel it buzzing at the base of my skull like a warning. I didn't try to repeat it. I knew better. Madison acted normal at breakfast. Too normal. She avoided my gaze completely, which was strange for someone who usually insisted on dominating every room she entered. Her silence wasn't fear, it was defiance. She was hiding something. Or rather, something was hiding behind her. Later that morning, her grandmother arrived to take us to church. Madison climbed into the front seat without hesitation, her usual smirk plastered on her face like everything was fine. I sat in the back, hands in my lap, watching her reflection in the rearview mirror. She didn't look back once. The car door was still open when I leaned forward and asked, "Do you remember anything from last night?" She hesitated. Just for a second. But hesitation is a crack in the mask. "No. You probably had a bad dream," she said casually, not even glancing back. Before I could respond, her grandmother turned her head sharply, her eyes locked on me with uncanny focus. "What did you just say?" she asked. "I asked if Madison remembers last night," I said, my voice too calm. She sat up while we were outside. She was speaking a different language. Not gibberish, something real. Her eyes narrowed. What did it sound like? So I told her. Not everything, not about the shadow, not about the silence, not about how my body refused to move while something impossibly dark slithered across the grass. But I described Madison's voice, the cadence, the weight of those impossible words. I described the change in her, the way she looked through me, not at me. Her grandmother listened without interrupting. Her face had gone pale, her hands clutching the steering wheel tighter with every sentence. When I finished, she didn't speak. She started the car, and we drove in silence. Normally, we'd sit somewhere in the middle during church, surrounded by familiar faces and the low murmur of the congregation. Not that day. That day, she walked us straight to the front pew. Madison groaned in protest, but the old woman gripped her wrist and made her sit. And then she held her hand. Tightly. Fiercely. She closed her eyes and began to pray, not quietly, not passively, but with intensity. I could see the veins in her neck as she whispered to a God that maybe hadn't been listening for a long time. Tears streaked her face. Madison kept trying to pull her hand away, rolling her eyes, muttering curses under her breath. She was embarrassed, annoyed. But beneath all that, I could tell, something else was irritated too. I watched her closely. Too closely. I wasn't just curious, I was hungry to understand. What had passed through her? What had tried to reach me? And more importantly, how could I bring it back? After church, we walked out into the burning sunlight. It felt wrong somehow, like it wasn't supposed to be that bright after what I had witnessed. The heat baked the pavement, but I felt cold. Numb. I kept glancing at Madison as we walked, watching her shadow on the sidewalk, half expecting it to flicker or move out of sync. But it didn't. Not yet. Her grandmother didn't start the car immediately. She just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring out the windshield with her lips pressed tight. Finally, without looking at either of us, she said, "You're staying with me for the rest of the summer, Madison." Madison blinked. What? Why? The old woman turned, her eyes hollow but filled with something fierce and unspoken. You need protection. And I can't protect you from your mother's house. Madison rolled her eyes. That's ridiculous. But she didn't argue further. Deep down, I think she wanted out of that place anyway. Her mom was no sanctuary, just another battlefield. Maybe she even understood what her grandmother meant, because that night, something had come for her. Her grandmother glanced at me through the rearview mirror. What you saw, it's not the first time something like that has happened. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I already knew what she meant. When I was a girl, she continued, her voice lower now, raw with memory, I saw something too. Something that promised me escape. A voice in a language no one else knew, but I understood it. It told me it could take the pain away. That I only had to say, yes. She swallowed. But I knew it was lying. I knew it wasn't God. And I chose to suffer rather than invite it in. Her hands trembled. I never told anyone, she said. Until now. That silence that followed was deeper than anything that had happened in the backyard. And I realized something terrifying then, the thing that came for Madison, it didn't just visit. It watched. It waited. It came back. And maybe it remembered the one who had said no. Back at Madison's house, we packed her things in silence. Her mother wasn't home, which was a small miracle. I helped carry a bag out to the car, and while her grandmother was inside grabbing something, Madison grabbed my wrist hard. Her eyes were different now. Not glowing or anything stupid like that, but aware. Wide and unblinking. You didn't see all of it, she said. I stared at her. What do you mean? She leaned closer, her voice low and brittle. When it touched me, when it went into me, I saw everything. I saw places that don't exist. Things that live under the skin of the world. And it spoke to me in that language. I didn't know what to say. But I didn't pull away. It wasn't a dream, she whispered. And it wasn't sleepwalking. I nodded slowly. I know. She let go and stepped back, as if realizing she'd said too much. Or not enough. When her grandmother returned, she slid into the passenger seat without another word. As they drove off, I felt it again, that pressure in the air. Like something had come too close and left a fingerprint on my life. I was no longer just a witness. I was part of it now. And maybe I wanted to be. The weeks that followed should have been normal. But they weren't. Madison never came back to her mom's house. I only saw her once in town, at a distance, walking next to her grandmother. She looked lighter somehow. Not happier, not free, but like something was sleeping inside her, waiting. Her eyes weren't empty, but they weren't hers either. I had questions. So many. And no one to ask. School started again, and Madison and I drifted, like kids do. She stayed quiet. avoided me. As if talking to me might wake something up. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me in class, just for a second, then she'd look away like she was ashamed. Or afraid. One time I cornered her near the library. "Do you still hear it?" I asked. She didn't pretend not to understand. She just nodded once, her jaw clenched. "And you?" I didn't answer. But the truth was, I did. Sometimes at night I'd lie in bed and the air would feel wrong. Heavy. The crickets outside would go silent again. And I'd hear that low, static hum. Not loud, just at the edge of perception. Like a signal waiting to be picked up. And sometimes I wanted to answer it. The language she had spoken that night, those twisted, ancient syllables, I found myself whispering them in the dark, practicing. Repeating them under my breath when I was alone. Not because I understood them. But because they made me feel something. Not scared. Not sad. Powerful. Like I was remembering something I had once known and forgotten. Something old. Something buried. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't have to. That kind of secret grows like a shadow inside you, it doesn't need to be spoken to be real. Years passed. Madison transferred schools halfway through sophomore year. Rumor was she went to live with relatives on the coast. I didn't care. I'd already started to change. I wore black. Spent hours alone. People called me weird, but that didn't bother me. I wanted to be left alone. Because sometimes, when it was quiet enough, the static would come back. The hum. The dark language. The promise. And then, one night, just like back then, it came again. I was outside, lying in the grass behind my grandparents' house, staring at the sky. No tent. Just the stars above and the smell of summer earth. And the silence fell like a curtain. No dogs. No insects. No cars. Just that aching stillness. And then it rose, slowly, from the edge of the yard. A shape. A ripple in the air. Darker than dark, like it absorbed the moonlight. A cloaked figure without a face. It didn't crawl. It didn't float. It just was, closer each time I blinked. And I didn't run. I spoke. I said the words I had burned into my brain that night years ago. I said them perfectly. Not out of fear. But because I was ready. The figure stopped just feet from me. I looked into its face, its emptiness, and for the first time, it answered. Not in words. But in understanding. This wasn't possession. It wasn't evil. It was recognition. Like a lost child finally coming home. It reached for me, not with arms, but with invitation. The static filled my bones. The sky dimmed. And everything disappeared. When I woke, I wasn't in the yard anymore. I was inside something. A memory. A place outside of time. A dark garden of obsidian and silence. Others were there, others like me. Hollow-eyed. Awakened. Speaking in whispers that bent the air. And in the center, the figure stood. Waiting. I walked forward. I opened my mouth. And I said yes.